My children left me at the hotel, and they had no idea I'd paid for everything that night. The revolving door sighed cold air onto my face as their Uber taillights smeared red across the wet Manhattan curb. The valet avoided my eyes. The concierge smiled that polite smile you give someone abandoned at midnight. Champagne laughter rose from the lobby bar while my hand trembled around the keycard I'd bought. The marble floor felt slick under my sensible heels, and somewhere a suitcase wheel clicked like a metronome to my humiliation. I'm Margaret Collins, 66, mother of 3 adults who still treat me like a purse with a pulse. An hour earlier, they'd clinked glasses at dinner I'd reserved, whispered over the check I'd already covered with my Amex, and staged their little, "We'll meet you upstairs, Mom" exit. I saw the eye rolls, the whispers, too tired, too slow, not cool enough for the rooftop after-party I had also planned. The chandelier scattered ice blue light across faces that refused to meet mine, while the citrus cleaner scent made the moment feel sterile and sharp. "Are you all set, ma'am?" the receptionist asked, as if set was something I'd been for years. What they didn't know was that every room, every ride, every ticket and tab that night lived under my account and my phone. The suites, the Broadway seats for tomorrow, the spa credits, the late-night room service they were counting on. I had arranged it all with quiet precision. I'd even left a sealed envelope at the front desk with a note that would sting more than any bill. And there, under the chandelier, I chose whether to let the lesson ring or rescue them one more time. Let me tell you how we got to this curb and what happened when the music stopped without my card behind it. If you've ever felt invisible to your own children, or believe gratitude shouldn't expire, subscribe to follow the rest of this story and others like it. The revolving door sighed again and pushed a ribbon of cold air across my cheeks, as if the building itself were trying to usher me forward. I stood there, a woman who has been many people, a wife, a widow, a receptionist, a PTA vice president, a Sunday school volunteer, a walking first aid kit and bake sale machine, and tonight only one thing, a mother who wasn't invited to the part after the part she planned. My name is Margaret Collins. I am 66 years old. I wear comfortable heels and a strand of pearls my husband gave me the autumn we thought we'd be poor forever, but happy anyway. I have 3 children, Catherine, who introduces herself as Kate at work but hasn't corrected me in years, Benjamin, who prefers Ben and reminds you of it as if your forgetfulness is a test you are failing, and Lila, the baby, who can make a photo of a coffee cup look like a revelation. If there is an antagonist here, it isn't the city or money or the rain on Manhattan stone. It is that particular glaze that can gather in my children's eyes when they look at me, like I am a lovely old photograph kept for sentiment and not much use. When Catherine, tailored black blazer over winter white trousers, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and told me not to worry about the roof bar, I watched the dismissal land in Ben and Lila the way a drop falls into milk and vanishes. They were aligned with her, without knowing it. "We'll just meet you upstairs, Mom," she said, and the Uber doors sealed up, and the taillights painted the wet curb like lipstick gone wrong. The concierge smiled the way customer service people do when they've seen too many small human scenes to make a report on any of them. The valet was very interested in his clipboard. Somewhere, an elevator chimed. Someone else's joy bubbled at the bar. I held my keycard in my hand like a stand-in for all the keys I have ever held. To a first house with a magnolia tree out front in Westfield. To the minivan that carried car seats and cleats, and a sticker that said, "I love my honor student." To a bedroom door I closed only when I needed 5 minutes to cry and pick myself up after the first time I learned about an affair that didn't end my marriage but ended a certain innocence. That was years ago. Life went on. I paid the plumber and sent the check for clarinet lessons and set up a tuition plan and took a second shift every Thursday for a year so Lila could stay in ballet. My knees ache more now when I stand too long at a sink. My hands shake sometimes, not from fear, but because 66-year-old hands simply do that. But I can hold a key card and a boundary at the same time. What they didn't know, and that was my choice, not theirs, was how far back tonight's planning really went. Weeks ago, in my quiet kitchen with its bowl of Granny Smiths and its little calendar where I still circle birthdays in blue ink, I had called this hotel. I had spoken with a young man named Jordan, who sounded as if he conducted an orchestra of reservation requests while juggling 3 screens, and I gave him my card number and then spelled Collins slowly because I have learned not to assume. I booked the suites so they would each have a door they could close. I booked spa credits because Lila told me she hadn't had a day off in forever. I booked a car service to pick Ben up from the airport because he told me he didn't want to bother with the train. I reserved dinner at the place Catherine liked, where they do that thing with a lemon over the oysters. And I got good orchestra seats for a show they've all been promising we'd see next time. I did it quietly, not because I was hiding, but because I was hoping that, once we were all together under the lights, we might remember how to be gentle again. I didn't tell them because I wanted no negotiating. No, you don't have to, which means, but you will. No fight over who covers what until I step in like a referee with a whistle and a wallet. The envelope I left at the front desk was heavy with more than paper. On the front I wrote, "For my children, please give to any of them who ask about charges." Inside, along with clear instructions to remove my card from their incidentals and divide the remaining balances proportionally among their rooms, was a note in my handwriting they all know. The same hand that signed field trip forms and wrote permission slips on the back of grocery lists. It said, "Love is not a bottomless credit line. I am happy to share a trip with you. I will not sponsor a night where you pretend I don't belong. Come find me in the morning and we can talk about what things cost and also what we cost each other." That's all. No lecture. It's not my style. I'm from a generation that says more with a casserole at the door than a speech. It wasn't always like this. That's what I thought as I crossed the lobby, past a vase of lilies so large it could have been part of a parade. When they were little, we came into the city at Christmas to see the tree at Rockefeller Center and the mechanical windows at Macy's. We rode the train from Summit with a paper bag of clementines and those little individually wrapped chocolates you get at the bank. They pressed their noses to the glass and their coats smelled like snow. Ben always wanted a pretzel from a street cart. Catherine would pick a boiled hot dog because she liked the buns and the steam and the whole uncomplicated ritual of it. Lila, who was 3 the first time, fell asleep halfway between 34th Street and Bryant Park, cheeks flushed from the cold and a sugar cookie bright as a traffic cone. Those were the days of mittens and skate laces and the constant inventory of things. "Do you have your hat? Where's the ticket? Give me your hand crossing the street." Every time we crossed, they gave me their hands without question. At home, my mornings are quiet. I wake to the sound of my neighbor's golden retriever scratching at his back door and the little thud of the morning paper landing on the drive. I make oatmeal with a sliced banana and a spoonful of peanut butter because I read somewhere it's good protein. I water the African violets my friend Ruth gave me after her sister's funeral. They bloom a violent purple that never fails to surprise me. I open my phone and scroll through the family group text. That string has its own rhythm. Memes from Ben. I pretend to get because I enjoy his pleasure in explaining them. A photo from Catherine of a sunset between glass towers captioned, "Another Day." A long message from Lila about a new campaign she got for her clients. A little heart someone taps under a photo of my stew. I have learned emojis like new vocabulary. I use them sparingly but deliberately. My days are not glamorous, and I like them that way. I volunteer on Wednesdays at the library, shelving returns and recommending mysteries to people who don't want anything too scary. I still drive myself to the ShopRite with coupons in my bag, even though I can afford the Whole Foods. I like the way Mr. Diaz in produce saves me the best corn when it's in season. It is by most measures a sweet life, but a sweet life comes dear. When I was 34 and Catherine needed braces we couldn't afford, I sold a little diamond ring my grandmother had given me. It wasn't my engagement ring, I still have that. A thin band with the stone so worn in its setting, it's practically an heirloom's heirloom. This was a cocktail ring I never wore because I was changing diapers and chopping onions most nights. I remember the jeweler, an honest man with kind eyebrows, telling me I could get more if I waited for a better market. I told him teeth weren't going to wait, and we laughed together, and I drove home relieved and a little bereft. When Ben needed extra help with math in middle school, I cut our cable for a year to pay for tutoring. Lila's depression showed up one gray March when the snow wouldn't leave the edges of the yard, and I found her a therapist she could talk to without watching my face carefully after every sentence. I went to work an earlier shift at the clinic, checking in patients with the flu when everyone else was staying home, so I could drive her without calculating gas. We kept the house when their father died, not through a miracle, though maybe through many small ones. Ruth's husband fixed the porch steps for the price of a pie, our pastor organized a yard spruce day, and I learned I could budget down to a nickel without shame. I did not expect medals for any of it. It is the quiet work women my age know and do, because we love and because we understand that a family is not held together by big speeches, but by hundreds and hundreds of small decisions to stay. There will be people who think I should have told them right away, "You hurt me." Maybe I should have. But there are hurts you can name and bandage, and there are others that live like drafts in a house. You feel them in your bones, but you can't quite tell where they're coming in. In the last few years, that draft has been there. It's the way Catherine does not sit next to me at dinners anymore, but positions me at the end where the light is bad. It's Ben checking his watch when I stand up from a table and waiting 2 paces ahead. It's Lila kissing my cheek and asking if I'm good, the same way she might ask a dog if he wants a treat. None of these are crimes. If I catalog them that way, then I'm the one making a case. They are just small silences where a different thing used to be. Dinner earlier had been lovely in the way expensive dinners are. A little too cold on the plate because of all the choreography. A little too loud because we were next to someone celebrating a promotion. They ordered cocktails with herbs in them, sprigs of rosemary all standing at attention. I stuck to a glass of red wine because I don't like surprises where I eat. The waiter flamed something at the next table, and the glow lit up Lila's cheekbones. How perfect she is at angles. When the check came, they performed the familiar theater of concern. "Mom, this is too much. We can split. Let me, it's my turn." As if we were all reciting lines in different acts of the same play. And then the pivot, the whisper, the new plan without me. "We'll meet you upstairs, Mom." Catherine's voice was a level that closes doors without anyone noticing. "You have the key, right?" Of course I had the key. I had all the keys. I had the backups and the emergency contacts and the responsibility. I smiled because, what else do you do? The receptionist asked, "Are you all set, ma'am?" And I nearly said yes out of habit, because I am set wherever I go. I nodded. My throat tightened around something I didn't want to swallow, and I heard myself tell her about the envelope. "It's still there?" She checked, efficient and kind. It was. I considered exciting the night manager by changing the plan. I could have undone everything. I could have put my card back on their rooms. I have done many things like this, last-minute rescues that no one saw as rescues because they felt, to my children, like how life is supposed to work. But when you have given and given, there comes a night when you either give the last piece of your piece or you hold it and see what happens. I took the elevator up. The mirrored walls cut my face into angles I recognized and didn't. I pressed the button gently. There's no reason to jab. In the quiet, I heard an echo. My own voice years ago, telling a 5-year-old Ben that we do not push the elevator buttons more than once because the machine already knows what to do. I remembered the Metro North ride home from a long day, all 3 of them asleep against me, the weight of trust heavier than a bag of groceries. I remembered Catherine's science fair volcano, which erupted all over our dining table and stained it pink. I remembered Lila asleep on her dance bag, glitter and exhaustion making a halo around her face. They have taken me for granted, yes, but you cannot live that way, tucked into someone, without trusting that they will catch you when you fall. I caught them because they were mine. Maybe the mistake was failing to notice that, at some point, they stopped falling and started leaning for sport. My suite was quiet and too big for one. The window framed the city in its silver gray, the rain smoothing out the edges. I took off my shoes and stood in my stocking feet on the thick carpet, an indulgence I'd never buy for my clean little house because it would be too much to vacuum. I turned on the little kettle and made a cup of tea with a bag they provided that tasted faintly of lemon and something like grasses. There was a robe, white and soft, the kind I brought back once from a hotel when Tom insisted because he said, "You never take anything for yourself." And I'd felt like a thief with my own luxury. Now I put it on. I am learning to wear what is offered. My phone buzzed. Lila's name, with a photo of her by a blue wall behind it, the way our phones have become scrapbooks we carry. "Hey Mom, did you leave your card at the bar? They're saying the tab is closed under your name?" I could hear the music in her message somehow. Then Catherine. "Mom, concierge says there's an envelope for us. What is this about? We'll talk tomorrow." Then Ben simply, "Hey, you okay?" I held the phone and let the questions sit. The tea warmed my hands. I thought about all the ways tomorrow could go. We could fight. We could laugh it off. I could cry and make them feel guilty. They could cry and make me feel cruel. Or maybe we could do something else. Something like walking across a street and giving your hand because you remember you're not alone. I typed slowly because my thumbs are not built for speed. To Lila, I wrote, "There's an envelope with details. We'll talk in the morning. Good night, sweetheart." To Catherine, "Yes, the envelope is for you three. Read it. I am in my room and safe. Good night." To Ben, I allowed a little of what I wanted to say. "I'm okay. Are you?" He replied with a ... that never became words. Sleep didn't come easily, but it did come. I have learned to breathe with the sound of unfamiliar city sirens, to let them become a lullaby from far away. In the darkness, I saw my life as a series of rooms, the nursery with its mobile of clouds, the school auditorium with a mouse of a microphone so many children leaned into with all their brave little hearts, the hospital waiting room where I slept in a hard chair while Tom had his last quiet night, all of us beside him, listening for something we couldn't hold, the offices where I smiled at people who were afraid and told them when their doctor would see them. And now, a hotel room with a bed too soft and a view too brilliant and a boundary I had finally drawn with ink. In the morning, the rain had blown itself out and left the sky the kind of clean blue that makes you forgive the city its arrogance. I woke early with the habits of my life, dressed, and put on the necklace with Tom's ring threaded on it that I sometimes wear on hard days. I brushed my hair and thought, as I always do when I face a conversation that matters, of my mother telling me before my first job interview, "Keep your shoulders back. People believe people who stand up." Old advice is very often simply geometry. The street smelled like coffee and a little bit of yesterday's smoke. A man in a Yankees cap was washing down the sidewalk with a hose, whistling something I almost recognized. I walked 2 blocks to a diner I love because it has never remodeled, never decided it needed to become fancy for no reason. There is a counter and the stools swivel, and the waitress calls you honey whether you are 7 or 70. I took a booth by the window and ordered a bagel with lox and a cup of black coffee because I have learned that if you add cream and sugar on a day like today, you don't finish your sentences. The laminated menu had a photo of blueberry pancakes with a dollop of whipped cream that made me silly for a second with memory. How Ben used to make faces with the blueberries, eyes and mouth, scarier each time. I was halfway through the bagel when I saw them. You carry a motherhood radar that no amount of age can switch off. I would know the shape of them anywhere. Catherine walked a step ahead, jaw set the way it used to be before a big debate tournament. Ben had his hands in his jacket pockets, a posture that at 12 meant regret. Lila's hair was pulled back hastily, sneakers soaked from last night. The high pony of an influencer traded early for a practical knot. The envelope must have been red. They stood inside the door like a trio queued to order sunlight, unsure how to get it and embarrassed to ask. "Hi," I said, standing. My voice was softer than I felt, likely because they were my children, and softness is my native language with them. Catherine took a breath, the kind that heralds PowerPoint slides. Ben glanced at the counter, like he wanted to sit on a stool and be small again. Lila's eyes were wet, and she blinked too fast like she could will tears back in. I gestured to the booth. They slid in, Catherine first, and it was almost funny that they arranged themselves in the same order they always did without thinking. Kate near the aisle so she could emerge first, Ben across from me so we could talk without too much looking. Lila between them, always the cushion. "What is this?" Catherine asked, holding the folded note like it might unfold into something much heavier than paper. "Mom, we could have discussed." "We are discussing," I said. I smiled to the waitress and ordered them coffee and pancakes before any of them could argue. I don't know why, but pancakes have always made us human. Maybe because you cannot be eloquent with maple syrup at your lip. Ben was the first to break the little staring contest. "We looked like fools last night," he said, not quite accusing. A little boy asking if a shot hurt. The bar said the tab was closed and the room wouldn't add incidentals and He stopped. I didn't like that feeling. "No one does," I said. "That feeling, Ben, of the floor moving when you thought it was steady? I'm not trying to embarrass you. I am trying to help us all stand somewhere honest." Lila leaned in. "Mom, we weren't trying to exclude you." She glanced at Catherine the way the youngest always checks the oldest's face for cues. "We just thought—" She trailed off, then her voice returned in a whisper. "I thought you'd be bored." "I am bored sometimes," I said. "I'm bored when people you love forget that there was a time you kept them alive with your hands. But that's not boredom you fix on a rooftop." "Catherine?" She didn't look angry. She looked tired, which I recognized because I have often looked that way. It felt like, "I feel like, Mom, you swoop in. You handle everything. It makes me feel like a child, and I don't want to be a child in front of you." Her mouth did a bright, tight smile I had seen at work events where you say the thing you know you must say. I wanted one night where it didn't feel like I had to perform the role of daughter with a checkbook. It was childish. There were so many ways we could go from there. I could have thrown receipts on the table. I could have listed dates and exact dollars like a bookkeeper reading inventory to the IRS. I could have told them about the nights I worked Thanksgiving so the new girl could be with her family, and how I ate a turkey sandwich in a supply closet and thought, "This is how it is when you are the person other people count on and you're a little bit alone." But all those ways would have made the point and missed the heart. I am older now. My knees may hurt when I kneel for too long, but I can bend without breaking. "I don't sponsor nights where I'm invisible," I said. "I will not pay for my own erasure. I want to be with you when we are together. Not as a purse, not as a chore, as your mother. When you are with me, come all the way." Their coffees arrived, the pancakes too, and the table filled with the smell of butter and syrup and the way you cannot argue while someone is putting a napkin in their lap. Lila laughed softly then, a sound that unknots something in me every time. "Mom," she said, "you're brave." "It took me 66 years to get that brave," I said. "It will ebb. I'll need reminders." Ben looked at his sister and then at me. "We never—" He stopped, as if the rest of the sentence might be a confession. He tried again. "I never thought about the cost of— I know money. I know the apartment and the flights and all that. I just didn't—" He rubbed his forehead. "We make jokes. We make those jokes and it's not funny, is it?" "It can be funny," I said. "I like jokes. I like light. But when joking is how you say the thing you're afraid to say, you end up stacking little blocks of resentment, and one day it's a wall, and you can't see each other." I took a breath, and I remembered to keep my shoulders back. "I am not asking you to pay me back. You couldn't. No one can. That's not how this works. But I am asking you to stop making me pay for being your mother in ways that cost pieces of me I still need." Catherine's shoulders lowered an inch. That's a measure I've used for years. The inch that says the fight is over, or that it never arrived. "We were unkind," she said. She looked right at me finally. "I have been managing you, like you are another calendar item. That isn't— I don't want to be that kind of daughter." Her eyes shone but didn't spill, and I loved her more than anything in that moment for her effort. "Thank you for the envelope," she said, and the corner of her mouth tipped up. It made me angrier than any bill could have. "I left it for all of us," I said. "Not as punishment, as possibility." We ate. The pancakes disappeared in the way things do when you were hungrier than you thought. I told them the story of the time I sold the ring, and they were silent in the way people are when silence is respect. Ben told me about the pressure he feels when he goes to work, and there are people answering to him, and he still feels like he should ask permission to go to the bathroom. Lila admitted she hadn't taken a day off because it felt like failure, and she didn't want to disappoint the invisible people who watch her. I disappoint my African violets every week, I said, and she laughed, and then cried, and then we were laughing and crying together. Catherine said she has a list on her phone titled Things to Do When Mom Gets Old, and she hated herself for it because it made me old before my time. You can rename it Things to Do When We Love Each Other, I said. Number 1 can be go to lunch and order what we really want. This is not a fairy tale. We didn't fix decades in an hour with pancakes. They are still themselves, ambitious, tender in their particular ways, a little selfish, as most Americans raised on being told they can be anything must be at first in order to become something. I am still myself, capable of holding a grudge and then letting it go with more grace than seems possible. The larger conflict ahead is not whether or not we go to the rooftop next time. It is whether we learn how to pay attention to each other as if attention were as precious as money. We talked about the show that night. We talked about spa appointments. We agreed that there would be no more whispering stage exits. If we are too tired, we say, I'm tired. If the music is too loud, we say, let's go somewhere we can hear ourselves. If someone must leave, they kiss the oldest woman at the table and say, we will see you at 9, as if that were a sacrament. I told them that my card would stay on the rooms for what I originally intended. For the togetherness I hoped to buy us one more time. Catherine held up her hand like a scout and said, noted and respected. Ben raised his coffee cup. Lila took a photo of the pancakes, then didn't post it. And for a second, that felt like a treaty. After breakfast, we walked, the 4 of us, without hurrying. There was a street musician playing Stand By Me on a saxophone, and we stopped to listen. Somewhere, a construction crew was yelling, but it didn't feel like anger, just men doing their jobs. The city had that Sunday look, even though it was Saturday, where everyone is forgiving themselves for being a little slower. We stood at a crosswalk. The light turned white and we crossed, and without thinking, Catherine's hand brushed mine. It was only a brush, a little human mistake of geometry, and then she did it on purpose, linked her arm through mine. Lila looped her arm through my other, and for a second, I was a girl myself, held up by my daughters. Ben walked ahead and then looked back, and his smile was the one he had at 9 when he made the shot in the last seconds and didn't believe anyone was cheering for him. Come on, he said. We've got a show to see. He held out his hand as if we were late to something beautiful. Back at the hotel, the concierge saw us and looked as if he didn't know if he should smile. I nodded. Thank you, I said, not just for him keeping track of my little plan, but for witnessing a woman decide she is not a fountain that never runs dry. We went upstairs together this time. At my door, I turned and said, one more thing. I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of small envelopes. I have always been a woman for envelopes. They are easier than speeches. Each had a name on it. Inside were copies of old photos. Catherine at 7 in a gold lame leotard. December had insisted we all buy. Ben with his science fair medal looking like it was token for a ride he couldn't wait to take. Lila, asleep in a heap of ribbon. Attached to each was a short note. For when you forget who I am to you. I handed them over. Open them when you need to remember that I've always been more than a card. They hugged me. It wasn't dramatic. No passerby would have said, my goodness, what a scene. It was just my children taking me in their arms in a hallway where the carpet muffled our feet and the lighting was kind and the world felt, for a moment, correct. In the quiet that followed, alone in my room, I realized that the war, if there had been one, was never between me and them. It was between the story we were telling, that I would always pay and they would always take, and the story we might start to write together now. I am not naive. There will be other nights when someone will forget, and the old habits will tug. But I have learned the difference between rescuing and respecting. Sometimes the gift you give your children at 66 is not a suite in a fancy hotel or good seats at a show. It is the chance to look at you across pancakes and see the person you built and ask her quietly, "Are you all set?" And mean, for the first time in a long time, "We can help you be." I don't think I'll ever forget the shape of that moment. The marble lobby behind me, the city's night air all pressed up against the revolving door, and the tiny, precise ache that had gathered at the base of my throat as if I'd swallowed a stone. Everything I'd built for 66 years, my home, my friendships, my children's lives and pleasures, seemed balanced on that one incandescent moment when they decided to walk out without me, as if I had quietly expired some unseen currency. And perhaps for them, I had. When you become a mother in this country, no matter how many other titles you earn along the way, you enter a kind of sacred contract. I learned it in my own childhood kitchen, under the gaze of a mother who cut the crusts off sandwiches with nurse's precision, and who never once let on that the same hands did her own checkbook trembling. You learn here that responsibility is a kind of inheritance fought for in lines at ShopRite, and in the softness with which you press a cool rag to a hot forehead at 3 a.m. It's a currency that should never run out, so long as your chest keeps rising and falling. At least that's what they teach you when you're young. But standing in that lobby under the frost-bitten clarity of a chandelier, I realized what I'd allowed my children to inherit alongside the shape of my nose and the curl of my hair was a bottomless expectation, that I'd always be there to pick up their pieces, pay each unseen tab, check the blackening bananas, and schedule the dentist. They had come to believe, with the unblinking confidence only children and kings seem to manage, that love and service are the same, and that both are endless, so long as you are quiet about their boundaries. I could feel the heat of it rising in me. The chill of the doors, the sting of Catherine's gentle brush-off, Ben's hurried glance, doing the Ben thing of pretending not to notice while deeply caring, and Lila, sweet Lila, rehearsing her grown woman independence by staging a disappearing act with her 2 elder siblings. The swirl of injustice formed quietly. It was a winter snow that didn't make a sound, but blanketed everything. Upstairs, the suite yawned open, cavernous and pristine, smelling faintly of lilies and expensive detergent. I locked the door behind me, and for the first time in years, I slid the security latch shut, not out of fear of anyone outside, but to hold my boundaries in, as if they'd otherwise escape and fly down the hallway. I stood there for a minute, my fingers curled around the cool chain, letting it anchor me. On the desk sat my object, my symbol, a small, battered velvet jewelry box, the cheap kind you get from a store where you know they're upselling you. It is unremarkable to anyone but me. Inside is Tom's wedding band, silver worn to tin at the edges from decades of hand-washing and habit. When he died, the nurse pressed it into my hand, wrapped in a hospital-issue tissue as if it were sacred. On nights when loneliness pressed its thumb against my sternum, I reached for it, not to wear but to weigh, to remember that love is a thing you hold on to, not a thing you let people carry off. I carried that little box into the armchair by the window, tucked my knees up, and let myself count the humiliations, each tiny slight, each time they forgot I had needs, like rosary beads. Catherine's endless delegating, her tight-edged, "We'll meet you there," as if my presence were a burdensome errand she could pencil in or erase. Ben, who as a child would have torn through walls to find me, now so fluent in the quick half-hug and the awkward check of his phone when I talk about anything that isn't logistics, unable to say, "I'm sorry," without a joke. Lila, who has made a kind of art out of invisible wounds, barely disguising the relief in her eyes when the adults leave her circle. You forgive little things. You tell yourself it's a phase. Busy lives, city distractions, the changing nature of family. But when the same ache visits you over and over, when you eat at tables where your own voice echoes back because no one is listening, it becomes something larger, a pattern, a rule. I caught my reflection in the hotel window, my hair mussed from the drizzle, and for the first time allowed myself to ask, what if this isn't only them? What if it is me, acquiescing, smoothing, always providing a landing so they never feel the fall. My anger was not volcanic, not the scorched earth rage you read about in novels. It was something quieter, a dense, bright clarity. The feeling that arrives after too many nights of emptying the dishwasher unnoticed, too many days spent complicit in your own sleight-of-hand erasure. That's when the plan formed. That was my moment of basta, my American epiphany. I would finally let the stones fall where they may. I would force us all to see the cost of what was invisible. I held Tom's ring in my palm until it grew warm, and there it was, the object of my resolve, the symbol of the love I carried, and the decision I'd never dared take before. The line would be drawn not in sand, but in receipts and presents. With a deep breath, I slipped the ring on a chain beside my own, close to my heart, heavy enough to remind me what stamina looks like. My plan was un-American, perhaps. It was not confrontation, which is what we worship here deep down, but precision. I would let the existing structure speak for itself. I left the envelope at the front desk. I sent the texts that rang no alarms but built new boundaries. Envelope at concierge, details inside, good night. I did not solve. I did not smooth. I girded myself against the urge to rescue, that old reflex. I let the logistics unravel, just until understanding followed. That night, I slept with the ring pressed to my chest and the envelope at the desk, 2 acts of courage, both. While I'd expected a storm, what followed at breakfast was only drizzle. A small, honest reckoning. The looks they gave, the questions that tumbled out, all sharp-edged confusion and reluctance, told me that my boundary had finally registered. The conversation was not loud, nor theatrical. It was heavy and halting, each of us testing the new geometry of acknowledgement. I heard their apologies, real and raw beneath the bravado, and I gave them room. I listened as Catherine, for the first time in years, admitted to fear. Not of the check, but of being seen as ungrateful. Ben's voice, always quick with a quip, unspooled a deeper thread. Remorse, guilt. Lila's tears, familiar and rare at once, were a language older than words. I found myself telling stories I hadn't planned to share. The ring, the pawn shop, the years of invisible arithmetic, of selling what's bright in order to save what's necessary. I watched them listen, actually listen, without expectation of reward or interruption. At some point, pancakes arrived, and the syrup made islands on their plates, and laughter edged through the grief. There was forgiveness, yes, but also something harder, a mutual acknowledgement. No one said thank you as a flag of surrender. Instead, they all looked me in the eyes and promised presence. After the meal, walking beneath the bluest New York sky, the city returned to me without the sourness of secrets. The familiar sidewalks, dirty, old, indomitable, felt, if not exactly like home, at least like neutral ground. Catherine linked her arm through mine at the crosswalk, not performative, but needing. Ben fetched coffee for everyone, a lumbering act of care. Lila, quiet beside me, rested her head against my shoulder as we waited for the walk sign, as if she needed to remember what being the smallest felt like. Back at the hotel, I gathered them in the hallway, the kind with carpet so plush it's almost hard to walk without tripping yourself, and handed them their envelopes, photos, and a note. No more bills, no more clandestine credit cards. Just artifacts of their own lives, fragments of their childhoods captured in bad lighting and oversaturated color. A mirror to remind them of the mother they've always had, one not for sale. When they hugged me, there were no tears, no grand gestures, just warmth and the press of arms around my ribs that spelled very quietly, I see you. For the first time in perhaps a decade, I believed them. Alone in my suite afterwards, I realized that I had not abandoned them. I had given them the opportunity to fully see me. Boundaries are not barricades, after all. They are invitations to engagement on equal footing. My mother used to say that there comes a day when you stop buying your children clothes and start lending them the keys to your life. Today was that day. The city thrummed beneath my window, indifferent, endless. My phone buzzed once. Thank you, Mom. Love you. No signature. But it didn't need one. I knew the hand that sent it. I pressed Tom's ring to my lips, whispered a thank you, and let the day close gently around me. No doors left revolving, no music left unpaid. Just me, Margaret Collins, mother, woman, and, for the first time in years, unmistakably seen. When the city settled into its unique sort of hush, horns quieter, footsteps more purposeful, I found myself once again in the armchair by the window, watching lines of sunlight warm up the skyline. Even inside my hotel room, the air still smelled faintly of cleaned linens and the lilies resting in the vestibule. Somewhere far below, a doorman called for a cab, his voice bouncing up in muffled syllables, lost before they reached me. Funny how sometimes, after so many years of orchestrating movement, dance lessons, carpool pickups, Thanksgiving dinners, you discover a comfort in being still, in letting the city swirl while you simply occupy space, belonging to no one but yourself. The velvet jewelry box was still heavy in my palm. Tom's ring, as it always did, reminded me of hands, the ones I'd held, the ones I'd dried when they fell at roller rinks, the ones I'd bandaged and packed lunches for, and, the hardest to acknowledge, the hands I sometimes longed to be held by myself. It's a peculiar thing, having lived your life at the edge of gratitude and invisibility. Last night, and all the many nights before it, had made a quiet treaty with that sensation. Only today did I realize I was allowed to rewrite it. After the hallway hugs, after the envelopes had passed hands and the weight of memory had settled across my children's faces, we spent our day with something almost like intention. There was the show, yes, the tickets I'd bought, the seats I'd chosen, a splash of Broadway gold pulsing up toward the rafters. I caught them glancing at me in the moments when the curtain shifted and the actors paused for applause. Lila, cheeks flushed from laughter, squeezed my hand. Ben let his head tip sideways, shoulder resting fleetingly against mine. Catherine reached into her purse for tissues, catching my eye, smiling a little, sharing the rawness of being open. It was, for the first time in recent memory, not choreographed. For just a while we existed together, not out of obligation or habit, but curiosity and, there it was, love, visible at last, with no camouflage. We walked afterwards in the easy cold, and when hunger struck, we found ourselves at a street corner hot dog vendor, just as we had years ago. I laughed when Ben ordered 2, mustard only, and Catherine pretended to balk at street food before caving in. We sat on a low stone wall surrounding a patch of dormant park and shared bites, hands sticky with ketchup, hearts soft with the old stories we let resurface. Lila leaned into my side, whispering, "I'm sorry." I didn't need to tell her she was forgiven. The warmth in her voice, the tremor of someone who has stepped, finally, into the space between apology and understanding, did all the work apology ever needs to do. They asked about the ring around my neck. I took it out, let it catch the dusty gold of winter sunlight, and told them, finally, about their father. Not the stories from holiday tables or family photo albums, but the real ones. How he used to leave me little notes in lunch bags, and how his hands shook when Ben was born, and how, in the very last days, he made me promise I would not disappear under the weight of other people's needs, not even theirs. "You can disappear just by being quiet, Margaret," he'd whispered, his voice losing vowels at the end. "Never stop letting them see you." I saw the glistening in Catherine's eyes, a language that didn't need translation. I heard Ben blow out a long breath, letting silence sweep through the space between us without fear. Lila nodded, all serious for a moment, then nudged me with her shoulder, breaking the solemnity, as only the youngest ever can. "You're good at being invisible, Mom, but you're also really, really good at coming back." Later, the city pressed itself back into that familiar dusk. Our footsteps turned homeward, toward the hotel, toward conversation, toward something new. I walked a few paces behind as my children chatted about nothing and everything, their jobs, an ill-fated apartment mouse, the glory of the show. The sidewalk shone with late-day sun. Looking at their 3 backs, I saw them not only as the grown adults they had become, but as the children they once were, the ones who would turn, startled, when they had run too far ahead, searching to make sure I was there. And for the first time, I understood. You can love someone and still let them feel your absence. That too is a kind of teaching. That too is love. Returning to the hotel, we found the lobby brimming with weekend excitement, laughter pealing out from the bar, a bellhop juggling cases, and a couple bickering in low tones by the elevators. I felt strangely light, not tired, not depleted, but full of some ancient current. To be seen, to be loved, to be enough. The concierge caught my eye and nodded, discreet as always, his kindness wrapped in the impersonal grace of those who see families pass through without ever really knowing their stories. But I knew mine. And now, so did my children. Back in my own suite, this time with voices of laughter echoing in the corridor. I undid the chain on the door, no longer needing its ward against myself. I placed Tom's ring, still threaded on the silver chain, onto the nightstand where the light would catch it first come dawn. The velvet box beside it, half open, as if inviting me to take another thing out. Something new. Possibility, perhaps, or the promise that a mother's love is not only service, but selfhood. That evening we let room service bring up hamburgers and cheesecake. Not because I offered, not because they expected, but because the ritual itself, the eating together, plates balanced on our laps as we watched an old movie on cable, was enough of a gift. Catherine refused help cleaning up, stacking plates, and sending Ben to the hall with the tray. Lila curled at my feet, scrolling through photos, sometimes giggling to herself, sometimes holding the screen up so I could see, inviting me into her world, a way of saying, "You belong here." Before they retreated to their rooms, each of my children paused at my door. Ben gave me a real hug, not that half-hug business, his hand warm between my shoulders. Catherine brushed my hair from my temple like she used to, and held it for a second, uncertain, then let it fall. Lila was last, her face suddenly so like the toddler she'd once been, the one whose arms would wrap my knees as I did the dinner dishes. "Can I stay a while?" she whispered. I let her, tucking her smallness next to me on the enormous bed, watching the city fade below us as the lights popped one by one across the grid. She talked, I listened, and at some point I realized that being present, truly present, is the greatest gift we can offer and accept. When at last I found myself alone, the hotel silent, the city at peace, I felt something loosen, warm and bright inside me. I thought of all the rooms I'd ever moved through, the nursery, the kitchens, the waiting rooms, the hotel suites, and how, for all their differences, there was always a key, always a door, and always the same longing, to be seen when you walk through. The marble floors of last night were still just below me, hard and unforgiving and cold, but I was no longer slipping on their surface. Instead, I stood steady with my boundaries, anchored by a small velvet box and a note in my own hand, witnessed now not only by the staff in pressed uniforms, but by my own children. There was grace in the balance, a soft miracle in not rescuing, but being real. Love does not mean losing yourself. Sometimes it means letting go, letting others step up and pay, and letting the world see you entirely. As I let my eyes close, my hands traced the outline of Tom's ring, smooth and certain against my chest. I thought of the boundaries I'd drawn, not as walls, but as invitations, a chance for my children to meet me where I truly am, not where I once was. I thought of mornings still to come, the three of them immune to the magic of hotels, but looking for me across the sticky maple syrup shine of diner tables, and the quiet, full presence of a mother who had finally learned to be present for herself, too. Somewhere, a revolving door swung wide, and I smiled, knowing that I would walk through, steady on my sensible heels, dignity intact, no longer afraid. No more silent agreements, no more hidden costs. Only this, the unspoken certainty that I am worth being seen, not only as a mother, but as Margaret, whole and loved, and finally free. And if you, like me, have ever felt invisible to the ones you love most, or if you're still learning that gratitude has no expiration, remember, you are more than what you give. You are enough for the room you walk into, with or without a card behind the account. If my story reached you, I hope you'll share your voice below, leave a like, and join me again. Because every heart, especially a mother's, deserves to be heard.